Like, hey, I'm Jordan Thibodeau. This is Joe Ternasky. We're both from the SVIC Podcast. Joe is a VP of Eng. Used to work at, oh my God, he was at Carta. He was at Wealthfront. He was at Google and Microsoft and all these great places. I was at Google and Slack. I worked in M&A for about, 12 years of my career. We're in the SVIC Podcast. Yep. So hello, everyone.
Yeah, and we'll link everything down below, so check them out. I love their coverage. We learn a lot every single time, I feel like. So thank you so much for being here. And breaking news, just as we're starting this, Devin. Okay. So Cognition Labs, the guy's name is not Devin. His name is Scott Wu, I believe. Everybody calls him Devin. It's like Tim Apple, Devin. Anyways.
He looks like a Devin.
So he comes out with the CEO of Windsurf. Maybe that's the new CEO or something like that. So, and apparently
the replacement CEO.
The replacement CEO, yeah. And they just scoop up the rest of Windsurf, which is a whole saga that we're going to get into really fast. And yeah, so a little bit more controversial than people, I think, anticipated. But let's kind of start. You guys have been following the whole story. So OpenAI wants to buy Windsurf, right? That's kind of like what happens. Everything seems fine. Can you take us through what happened up until today, I guess?
Gosh, so OpenAI wanted to buy Windsurf. They wanted to give him a $3 billion valuation in OpenAI stock, which Windsurf employees like because OpenAI stock has been going up like a rocket. So that means OpenAI pays you $3 billion equity, but the way this thing is going, that $3 billion could turn into maybe 15 billion, 20 billion over the course of time. And I saw that in Google days where founders will say, hey, no, don't give us cash, give us Google stock. And you want that because you want them to believe the mission. So then Microsoft was like, hey, we have a contract here that says all of your IP belongs to us. Plus, if you buy Windsurf for $3 billion, we get it too. And so OpenAI was like, so we're going to spend $3 billion of our equity to then give you all the IP and maybe the models we train from this, and you're not going to get anything. You're just going to get it for free. So
yeah, Sam did not like that.
Yeah. So in any good M&A, it's very important that you guys have chase cars. So if you talk to any of these companies and they say, hey, so who else is looking at you? You'd be like, I have a lot of other interests. And you go, Mom, do you want to buy my company? Great. Yeah, I have a lot of interest because we are social creatures. If we don't see other people thinking that something has value, then we think, oh, this thing is like sloppy seconds. I don't want to touch it. Same thing with interviewing. So they were courting Google. Google came through and said, hey, we'll give you $2.4 billion in cash. I want both co-founders and I want your AI researchers and maybe a schnitzel of product or eng or something. And because we have antitrust heat, we're going to do a license and release deal. Now, this is not a new concept. When I worked on a lot of deals at Google, we were doing license and releases before, not just for antitrust. It was because, for instance, let's say Dylan and Wes create a company and they get a third person in the company called Melissa, and they call it WMD, Wes, Melissa, and Dylan.
Yeah. Oh, no.
Right?
Yeah, of course.
Exactly. Google could be like, I don't know if we want to be associated with that. They might be getting lawsuits for that or something. Is there a way we can just do a license and release and we'll just take Dylan and Wes and Melissa and we'll take Schnitzel, the IP and employees, but then that organization is independent of Google. So if they do get sued, we don't expose our gold mine to that. So that's why you do license and releases. For this case, though, they're getting a lot of scrutiny, antitrust scrutiny from, it used to be Lena Khan, and now it's Trump administration does not like big tech, and they have good reasons too. And so they don't want to have the DOJ or FTC say, we want to investigate this deal or slow it down. So that's why you do a license and release. Now, the drama was a lot of people on Twitter were saying, oh, well, they're only taking so many employees and the other employees are getting nothing and they're getting screwed and this is ruining the whole startup ecosystem. Wow. And I was like, time out. First, when Google did this before a character AI deal, they bought that for $2 billion plus. And any employee who had vested equity in character and AI who was part of the license and release got a special cash out payment. Like a special payment, like they were part of the acquisition. So they got taken care of. And Google was going to do the same thing. It did do similar same thing here for this license release deal, but they didn't fully announce it yet. So people were confused. And so when there's confusion, people start putting in hype and fear and all this other garbage. So it turned out that not only did Google take care of people who had vested equity. They also had $100 million that was also given to the remnants of the Windsurf company that the CEO could use for special retention money. So those employees who didn't get a cash out because they'd invested equity, the CEO's not going to be like, oh, so this company has really no enterprise value. You're going to stay and work with us for another year, right? No. He goes, hey, here's about $500,000 to $1 million. You're a great performer. Will you stay with us for a year and a half, 2 years or something? So they got taken care of too. And then this Devin announcement comes through and they say, hey, we're taking the whole company, doing a full acquisition because, they didn't say this part, we don't have antitrust heat on us. We're small old Devin. No one cares about us. So we're going to acquire the company. We're going to get the name brand. We're going to get the IP and get the rest of the employees. And we're also going to accelerate the invested equity that they had inside of Windsurf. So all of this is confusion. Like, it's all very confusing and it's all like opaque. And that's kind of what M&A is to a degree. But in the end, Google did well by the Windsurf employees and Devin did well by them too. So it all worked out. So
when you look at the landscape, who messed up? Or like, does it seem like all the CEOs were making logical decisions across the board and it just played out this way naturally? Or do you feel like somebody wasn't really thinking all the way?
I don't think anyone messed up. The only people who weren't thinking were the folks on Twitter. I think what these CEOs were dealing with is, Varun, I believed, he used to work at a FANG company. He knows the M&A game and how things go. Ideally, if you're Google, like for instance, would you either want to buy Windsurf out completely to make sure you fold everyone into or take all the IP, all the assets, and not have to worry about a skeleton org that still has IP that could possibly compete against you? So now Devin just scooped up all the Windsurf assets, and let's say something crazy happens and they create something that's far better than what Varun and team could do when they take the market. You have that remnant out there. It's like, no, large tech companies do not like loose ends. Not as they're going to kill people like the Lannisters and Game of Thrones, but they want to make sure everything's buttoned up, and so ideally they would want to do the full acquisition. But they couldn't because of antitrust heat. So based upon the political dynamics of the situation, they made the best decisions under that framework.
Yeah, don't you think, Jordan, going back to Dylan's question, that Microsoft sort of overplayed its hand here?
Yes. And Joe, do you remember, like, it was like we were talking about on the show a couple months ago that Mustafa had this weird meeting with Mira Murati when she was still at OpenAI, and he was basically trying to shake her down, saying, "How does O1 work? Tell me everything." And she's like, time out. And so there's this kind of thirst that Mustafa has, because people have forgot that Mustafa's company was, I think, licensed and released by Microsoft also as a bet that Mustafa would be able to get Microsoft back into the AI game. And so far, I haven't really seen anything to justify that price. So this heavy-handed move, they tried to go against OpenAI and say, we also want the Windsurf IP. It makes me wonder if that was Mustafa again saying, okay, I really need this information. But Joe, come on.
That's your rumor mongering.
Yeah, it is. Yes.
Into the mix.
Yeah, but Joe, I would love to hear what you think.
I just think that if Microsoft could have gotten everything they wanted, it would have been access to what Windsurf had built, any lessons they'd learned, any IP they'd developed. I mean, you have to go all the way back and remember that Microsoft developed Visual Studio Code and then open sourced it. And then Cognition, the company, and Windsurf and a couple others picked up this open source project and extended it, but in a fairly minor way, to integrate it with other companies' large language models and produce their products. And now they're valued at billions of dollars a piece. And then you have a company that's 49% owned by Microsoft acquiring a company whose value is largely the same open source code that Microsoft originally gave to the market, which is a mind-boggling situation. But then Microsoft was so forceful in their ownership via OpenAI that they scuttled the deal and pushed key parts of the team into the hands of Google. Remember when Microsoft did the initial deal with OpenAI and the Microsoft CEO was saying, I want to see Google dance. I want to basically, motivate them to do something and put the pressure on them. This is the opposite of that.
Remember, they would say,
Yeah.
we're above OpenAI, below them and everything.
Right.
We know everything
Dang.
they're doing.
And you
It's
can,
like, no,
and
you
I can
don't.
totally imagine that frustration because you're looking at the Azure cloud and you're like, I can host all these models, and you're like, I open source this IDE, and like I'm behind it, and like I can't just bridge the two things that I'm best at.
Yeah. One other piece of the puzzle here was that when OpenAI was trying to acquire Windsurf, Anthropic went, well, we're cutting you guys off. So you were not allowed to use kind of like the first party API for Windsurf, so they cut them off. This sounds like now they're back in the fold with Anthropic. That's what the two, Scott Wu, Devin, and whoever's the new CEO of Windsurf, or whoever that person is, I'm not familiar with them. That's what they said. We're back in the fold with Anthropic. And so I gotta, first of all, say thank you to you guys, because a few times either the last time we talked or 2 times ago, when I said, so is Google potentially going to be looking at some acquisitions, or they're building their own internal stuff with Firebase and all the stuff that they're doing? You guys are like, maybe. So, and this was, it's funny because here it was, they were like working in the background to scoop these guys up. And we also talked about why these IDEs plus LLM, why they're so important. Because at some point, some people are saying, okay, so
you should summarize that part.
Yeah, and I wanted to kind of get your guys'. Go ahead, sorry.
You should give a summary of that. Like, I'm sure a lot of people are baffled that these things are at such valuations and getting such acquisition offers, especially since the starting point was Microsoft open sourcing this thing, which at the time was kind of admitting there's not really a business there. We'd rather just have it be open sourced and available to everyone and get community contributions. Whereas now, the products that are built on top of that same IDE are worth a couple $2 billion a piece. And I'm sure most people are baffled by that.
Yes. And so I think at some point there was this narrative, and I was, looking into it too, because the idea was that with these AI agents, they would be, people were saying, okay, so software engineers, they're gone. We don't need any more software engineers. Everything's going to be replaced by these AI coders, right? And the thing is, now it's obvious that a lot of these companies are valuing very highly these fairly simple setups. Like, it's usually VS Code plus some sort of a chatbot on the side. And they're valuing it so high that it's obvious that no, we're not going to some sort of automated coders anytime soon. What's more likely is that the reason they're so highly valued is they want that entire data and ecosystem and that entire loop of software development with the humans driving it on their platform, and everybody's trying to do it. So we have Google with multiple attempts, like they're playing on multiple fronts. We have OpenAI, we have Anthropic, although they don't have their own answer to it. They do have Claude Code and
Code tool.
Yeah, which is like a little bit. It's similar, but it's almost like a little kind of a separate thing. But they're all kind of playing for the same game. They're all trying to get everybody. And you guys, I think, first kind of opened my eyes to this when this whole thing was, and you see these valuations go like exponential, basically. So what does that tell us about where things are going for software engineers? Because a lot of people ask me, like, okay, I'm going to school right now to be a software engineer, computer science. Should I stop and learn plumbing?
Plumbing's great, but most people, you want to be behind the keyboard. My dad was in the trade for his whole entire career, and it just destroyed his body. He was in HVAC and whatnot.
Hit a plumbing cord there. You gotta be careful.
No, well, it wasn't a plumber, but actually I was HVAC, but I was blue collar work. But every time I think of plumbing, I think of in Happy Gilmore when he talks about the different roles he had, and he was a plumber, and it showed him with his pants down to his ankles. He's bent over, and I was like, oh god. So Joe knows more on the tech side of this, but I want to touch on the valuations. People see these valuations and they say, God, they're paying $3 billion maybe for Windsurf, and they're paying $2.4 billion for like Pi, and they're making billions more for character AI and whatnot. You can't look at monopoly companies' actions and say this represents the broader market. What they're dealing with is they are driven by the fear of missing out, and they look at their current gold mine, and they have like a Willy Wonka chocolate factory river of cash coming in. Like, for instance, Facebook is bringing in $80 $80 billion in free cash flow every year. How do you even conceptualize any of that? And so when people were saying, "Oh my God, they're spending so much on Scale AI, and they're buying all these engineers for hundreds of millions of dollars," they look at that as I think they right now are at $3 trillion market cap, which is something of like less than 1% of what they're spending right now for this talent plus Scale AI. It's like a rounding error for them. They don't even really care. What they care more about is, what if we miss out on the next $1 trillion, billion-dollar business, and we're left on the side? So we can either spend a little bit now, when I say it in relative terms, and hey, we messed things up and we wasted 15, 20, $30 billion, which is a few percentage points for our market cap. But if it does work out, we've now expanded our market opportunity by hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars. So it's a good risk to take. Similar like venture capitalists, where they're just putting out checks, multiple checks in different companies. 99% are going to fail, but if that one hits, it makes up for all what you're doing. Joe, would love to hear what your thoughts are on just what's going on here in the startup space, what's going on in the future of engineers' careers? Like, what would you say to a college kid who's majoring in computer science? Should you go forward and keep going, or should you just go into plumbing?
Man, I don't think we've seen any evidence that the whole job category is going to be obsolete, which I think is what people are worried about. But we're definitely seeing that a person who's good at using these tools can be faster, and they can go into areas that they don't know as well. Like people have to understand that engineers are often highly specialized. They themselves will say, I do back-end work, or I do front-end work, or I do design work, or whatever. And that means that they're good at that kind of work, and they probably like doing that kind of work. And if you put them in a completely different environment, a different framework, a different language, they would be much slower, and it would take them a while to learn that environment and speed up again. And you can see this when you take a person who's sort of technical, but not a day-to-day engineer, and you give them all these tools and they can vibe code their way to getting something working like in an afternoon. And you see that and you're thinking, even a good engineer would have spent a couple of days just reading documentation and making decisions about what things they were going to use. And in the vibe coded case, the LLMs just made all those decisions for you and generated a bunch of code. Hopefully it made the right decisions. But my point is, a person with these tools can move really fast, and they don't have to look things up the old way. And so I think,
and like, imagine how many industries too. Like, so say you're one of these few mega companies that are putting together some of these foundation models, or you're at least like providing the infrastructure in terms of servers. Like, there's somebody out there, like in the healthcare space, for every like division of that. There's somebody out there in the finance space, and every division of that. Manufacturing, transport, retail, and then advertising. Like these companies are fighting over which chunks of these huge markets end up, they become, not to reference before, but the plumbing of these new systems. And like when you have the network effect of social media, you like just cashed in huge. And if you get the network effect of one of these industries disrupted by a generally intelligent AI, it's going to be a cash cow too. So yeah, like as the job point of view, you better be thinking about how you're going to be the person implementing those, so you still have some value. And then from the company point of view, I see what the monopolies are willing to risk billions on.
True. Joe, we were having barbecue, enter in that sound clip of we eat ribs together and whatnot, and dance to salsa music. So, Joe, talk about that example of when the spreadsheet hit accounting.
Yeah.
And what they did for accountants.
Ooh.
Yeah, this is a popular
history. There you go, dude.
This is a popular example with economists because when personal computers first started becoming available and spreadsheet applications were, the most popular thing at the time, that was sort of a killer app. Some accountants got really good at using spreadsheets on personal computers. And this is sort of like operating a Model T. Like you had to constantly keep the personal computer working. Things were just always breaking and going wrong between the operating system and the application and if you even were lucky enough to have a hard drive. Anyway, so certain accountants became like 10 times as productive as their peers. And often they would end up leaving their job and forming a consultancy and contracting back to the company that they worked for before, But now they could just get a huge amount done. And so they could do their original amount of work in like a tenth the time. And then they could farm themselves out to 9 other companies to do the same job. And they became not only more wealthy, but dramatically more productive. Eventually, spreadsheets diffused into all the companies, and everyone learned how to do it. But for a few years there was this odd reconfiguration of the job category between the sort of, it's kind of the classic haves and have-nots, right? The people who knew how to use the tools and the people who were still working the old way.
So true. When I was at Slack and then Salesforce acquired us, ChatGPT came out. It was a glorious moment in my career and life. So good. And we, because Slack was very popular and OpenAI was using it, they reached out to us and said, hey, we'd like to make a ChatGPT app. Do you think that'd be useful for your enterprises? Oh, yeah. And of course, Salesforce, because they don't know what they're doing, told Slack product managers working on this, okay, but only ChatGPT can only be used with no one at Salesforce internally can use it, and no one in engine product in Slack can use it, and only HR and legal can use it. And I was M&A HR, and so I got access. And I was the only one of the few tech-forward people who wasn't afraid of AI at that time. And so I got early access to it, and it was like someone gave me the Iron Man suit at work. And so when I had to scope out projects, you create like a project plan, which is similar to a PRD for engineering and whatnot. I could just create that in maybe like 15, 20 minutes, which usually would take me maybe 2 or 3 hours. And so I was just kicking out all this work, and people were like, wow, you're going really fast at this stuff. Like, what's going on? You're like, oh, just weird
Cheating.
AI apps help them cheating, basically, right?
Yeah, good time to ask for a raise. Yeah, why not?
Right, exactly. But no, it kind of it aligns what Joe was saying with the spreadsheets. I also want to follow in and mention that people are conflating overhiring in engineering and tech from 2010 to 2020 to then the COVID super overhiring, which then led to the post-COVID layoffs with AI's coming in and taking everyone's job. Like, that's the cover story executives are using right now, because what usually happens is we go by groupthink. We need PR spin to explain what we're doing, because we want to make sure everyone can align what we're getting done. And so when these large tech companies like Google and Microsoft and whatnot are starting laying off people, it's in their interest, one, to maybe not be exactly clear with people why we're doing it, and then two, let people think it's AI related because they just so happen to be selling AI products. That's why Microsoft went to the New York Times and was
Mark in your book.
yeah, the head of work for Microsoft AI or something, it was like a sales job, was like, wrote a paper wrote an article in the New York Times saying, I'm afraid for the future of work, AI is going to take everything. I'm like, oh, really? Is it because you work at the company that's trying to sell that? Huh? But no one fact checks anymore nowadays. They just go with the story. So I look at, I speak to people who are hiring managers of these companies, and I say, hey, so all these folks are getting laid off. Like, are you getting an AI agent that's taking that work over? I'm like, hell no, I can't trust that thing. And I'm not going to give up headcount for that, because if I give up headcount for the AI agent and it doesn't produce, it's my ass who's on the line who has to do all the cleanup work. They do use AI for human-in-the-loop related type stuff, but this whole narrative that AI is what's causing all the job loss, like, no, it's all the bloat and overhiring for the last 15 some odd years that they were also too afraid of to let people go. So instead, they now have the out with using AI as a cover story. So
Microsoft just said they saved $500 million thanks to AI. Do you believe it? Or do you think they just cut 9,000 people because they were bloated?
Well, it's kind of like the whole thing of like, oh, AI generates 50% of our code. And it's like, of that code, how much of it is being checked in actually? How much of that is gobbledygook? Like, let's get real here. So I would have to see those numbers. The best economic data I've seen is from Google, is when they came out with their Alpha Evolve, and they're basically saying, hey, you know what? This thing has saved us 0.7% on our global compute spend. And here's some of the receipts on how that happened. I'm like, okay, that makes sense here. But as far as, $500 million, I'd love to see someone on the accounting side to see how they came up with those numbers.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask, as you bring it up, whatever that number was. So they saved a lot of money on data centers. Apparently the Google's data centers is called the Borg, which I did not know that. That's kind of a cool name.
That's
0.7% of Google's
system.
Yeah.
The Borg-
Go ahead. Sorry.
The Borg is the software system that allocates jobs to machines and data centers. So an engineer will sort of describe, here's my service. I need this many servers. I need this many servers that have this many processors and this many servers that have this much storage and blah, blah, blah. And then the Borg allocates that to the global supply of data centers. And then it continuously monitors it such that if a data center goes offline or a rack goes offline, it'll automatically spin up new servers to keep that product running, right? A lot of the ideas that are in Borg, the components of it, are what became the open source Kubernetes project.
Interesting. Okay. And so just to give people an idea, like how much sort of, number one, how much does this cost? And number two, what kind of an impact does it have on Google's like productivity? Like how big of a deal it is? So that 0.7%, is that a rounding error or is it a fairly hefty improvement?
No, that's a big improvement. I'm sure there are engineers working on projects for a year plus that are thrilled to get a similar improvement like that. I remember at one time someone got an improvement in one of my teams on the ads system, and it was something like 5%. We were just in one country, and immediately the ads leadership, even though it was like the middle of the night in the US, was on the phone. Like, what the hell did you do to get an improvement that big in your app? So they monitor those things constantly, and an improvement of even 0.7% would be massive.
Yeah, that's what I really loved about Alpha Evolve, because it's like these little things that you don't think, because they solved some 60-year-old algorithm in mathematics where they shaved one step off of matrix multiplications for this one specific use case. And it's kind of a big deal because those things have been optimized for so long. You don't expect easy wins anymore. So these little improvements is definitely very important. And there's another where they improved some architecture by 23% in another area. So, but yes, I guess so. Should we move on to Grok and maybe come back and explore what we've been talking about further? Just because Grok is on everybody's minds. So Elon Musk released Grok 4. It's very controversial because some people, if you look at it one way, it's number one in the world. Some other metrics are putting it number 66 on yup.ai, although that seems a little bit low. I feel like it's probably a little bit higher. So let's kind of like dive in and see what's real, what's not. It seems like they took a weaker model, which was Grok 3. They threw 10x the amount of RL compute at it. So a lot of this is from RL. And there's been some amazing improvements on one hand. On the other hand, it's not that great at other things. What's your guys' take on this?
Joe, you have the floor.
Yeah, I think the trend is really interesting because, to your point, Wes, they really did a lot of reinforcement learning training on this thing. And it seems like, I'm guessing that training is what's responsible for the reaction from the ArcAGI people.
Right.
And their reaction was really extreme. Like, this is just a huge improvement, similar to the reaction they had when 01 and 03 were first applied to the Arc Challenge. And I think they're fairly strong critics of just the traditional scaling approach. The whole point of the Arc Challenge was, we're going to test what really leads to human-like thinking and artificial intelligence versus just the traditional benchmarks. And I think they actually characterized Grok 4 as the first example they'd seen of fluid intelligence.
Yep. Exactly. And so just for people that maybe not familiar, so there's crystallized intelligence, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, of course, but crystallized intelligence versus fluid intelligence. Crystallized intelligence is kind of like once you have experience and knowledge and education, it's kind of tapping all those things that you've learned to produce results. Fluid intelligence is more learning quickly in a situation, coming up with novel solutions without necessarily having a lot of knowledge in that area. So more like childlike, it tends to peak early in adulthood versus crystallized intelligence. So LLMs have, I would say, great crystallized intelligence. They have tons of knowledge. They're able to use that to solve problems, but you give them something they're not familiar with and they're just dumb as a rock. So with ArcAGI 2, one of the founders of ArcAGI said this is showing that Grok 4 has non-zero levels of fluid intelligence. And it seems like it might be the first model to have that, which is interesting. Where's that coming from? Is it just something that emerges as we throw more RL compute? What do you think about that?
That's what the suggestion is, right? That it was the RL training that put it over the top. And I think actually Jordan posted an interesting Andre Carpathy tweet about this we should talk about. But I think generally people are expecting that instead of spending 90% of your compute on traditional pre-training and then a smaller amount, say 10% on RL training, they're expecting that over time RL training becomes a bigger and bigger percentage, and maybe they even flip where it's 90% RL training. But it's not a fixed budget of compute. The total amount of compute is growing at a pretty good rate. Just the proportion is shifting from pre-training to RL.
Yeah, so what happens? Do you think that we'll see something where Grok or somebody else takes that 10x compute, throws it at a base model, then 10x and throws it at RL, and we're going to see something just next level? Is that something that might be possible for the next few years?
I think this is just pure guesswork, but I think we'll see the same thing as what happened with pre-training. We saw a ramp up where the models were just getting better and better and better. And then we saw a sort of a leveling off where we got diminishing returns and everyone panicked. And then with RL, we're seeing the same kind of ramp up again. And my guess would be like most other technologies, it'll level off at some point, and then we'll look for another what technologists would call an S-curve to kick in at an even higher level.
So a series of X curves, potentially each one kind of taking us to the next level. One after that's interesting.
The next one picks up from where the previous one left off and carries you to a higher level. And you have this period of mania when you're on the really steep part of the S-curve where, it looks like an exponential on the bottom half, right? And everyone loses their mind and they throw around terms like exponential improvement and it's never going to end and we're having a lot of parties and our valuation's going up. And then it starts to level off and you go into the depressive stage, right? Jordan, what's that Carlotta Perez book about like technology and financial economics book?
I know what you're talking about. I'll have a link.
It's a famous book, but she essentially talks about when you see these S-curves, in the lower part of the curve, you really have the technology innovation. In the upper part of the curve, the technology innovation is carrying you, but starting to wear out. And then what you see is financial innovation, where people just come in and throw money at the problem, or they use the money for marketing or for acquisitions, or in this particular case, we would use it for just building data centers.
So when you see XAI get so much scale so fast, like, is it not just a money problem? Do you feel like Elon also picked the right people to innovate to Grok 4, or do you feel like that was just the money part of that curve?
No, there's definitely somebody in there who is not only pushing, right at the high end of the research techniques, but also a bunch of technologists who knew how to build out that many GPUs and get them all coordinated. I mean, that's a spectacular achievement. Like earlier, we were talking about the Borg at Google. Remember, Google had, 20 years to build all those systems out and get it fairly smooth, such that when an engineer pushes code to production and says, I want hundreds of machines around the world supporting my service, they get that, right? All that infrastructure is built out. Whereas these maniacs at XAI, as far as I can tell, they started with nothing and very quickly got themselves in the game. And now we can sort of fight about, well, is their model really the best? And they're kind of, gaming the benchmarks. And I'm like, it's a miracle they're even in the game.
Yeah. We have to give them a shout out for that. Just the team and how those guys and gals were able to put so much time together. Like they're sleeping in the office, making this thing happen. They put together like the whole entire hardware stack, got the data center going, and they're shipping. Like that's awesome. And I think other tech companies look at that and say, gosh, our headcounts are so bloated. And this team over here is just cooking on all cylinders. They have less headcount. They do have financial level support. We do, but they just are able to ship. Like, what's going on here? I will say though is what's interesting is artificial analysis has an index. Actually, let me present this real quick. Is that cool? Let me see if I can.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
semi-analysis.
Yeah. It's there's semi-analysis and then there's also artificial analysis. Those are all the AI models. Now, um, they have this thing called the cost to run artificial intelligence index, and they looked at Grok 4, and it cost about $14 in input tokens, and then $12 cost for output tokens. But then the majority of the cost was reasoning, which cost about $1,600 or so. Which, if you compare it to maybe O3, you're looking at maybe input cost of $9 and output cost of $24, and the reasoning cost is about $357 overall. Now, of course, these things will get cheaper over time, but what I'm wondering is when Joe made that point saying about that book, how you go from technology takes you up the curve, and then finance then gets you further. Another way of looking at it is you have tech like we're seeing, but then we start seeing product improvements, which is another way for finance, what Joe was mentioning. And I think if you ask most normies what models are they using for ChatGPT, they don't say I'm using O3 Pro reasoning. It's like, no, I'm using the default one. And what are they sending me to? 4.0, because it's quick, it's fast, it gives me the answers that we want. And so what my takeaway for Grok 4 was, bravo to what the team did and everything, but I didn't see, and when I say but, it's not like they didn't do anything. It was better than I could ever do in my whole entire lifetime. I'm some M&A ape. I didn't see like okay, this is going to lead to a step change in performance, and all these use cases for AI agents that we couldn't get to work properly are now unlocked because of this. Or my own vibe test that is anti-benchmark, because I think some of the benchmarks are overused, is did we see any people up in arms saying, well, this new model can't really do my job that well, or we need to sue this company because what they're doing is illegal? That's always a sign to me that there's something real there. It's on the cusp of bringing models forward to make sure now it's taking on more economic tasks.
That's your test for how good it is. Do people want to sue them?
Exactly. And I think after the hype's dying down, now we're seeing people on Twitter. We have some Nate Jones videos we can go over who are saying, I've used my internal evals. Grok 4 is impressive, but actually I'm getting the same level of performance out of O3 or Claude 4 Opus Thinking. So go ahead.
Yeah, so if it is like a laser focus that made XAI get to this level so quick, and you might look at someone like Microsoft and Facebook and think they're a bit bloated, they're using GPUs for different reasons, not everybody's like super aligned. Does that make you think that Ilya's safe superintelligence might be the leader because they've just been so focused on one thing for so long with RL and scaling, but we don't get to ever hear what they're up to?
Ooh, I have my own thoughts on that, but Joe, I would hear what your thoughts are because you're closer to the science.
Well, I think there's a line from when they were working on O1, and the founder of Safe Superintelligence was right in the middle of that, and they essentially saw that the approach that O1 took could make a big improvement. Right, this goes back to the sort of S-curve theory. And I think the way they interpreted that was, this is another separate technique that will give us another S-curve on top of any diminishing returns we see from pre-training. And so when the conflict happened inside of OpenAI and a few of those senior researchers left, it feels like the decision they made was, okay, we're going to stop trying to fight this trend and worry about making sure that the models are friendly and not harmful. And we're going to focus instead on what we saw, the sort of potential that we saw during the initial training of O1. And that is, we're going to take this new technique and push it to the maximum. And then since then, the only thing that I've seen is a kind of suggestion that they're focusing on test time training, which goes back to Wes's point about fluid intelligence. Right? The idea that you would give a model a problem and that it wouldn't just respond in a pure inference way, but that it would actually sort of make on-the-fly changes to itself in order to solve that problem really well. And there's a whole bunch of examples of that test time training sort of approach, and many of them are the approaches that helped crack the previous ARC challenge.
Joe, well said. What I like to do, because on the M&A side, I like checking like where people are moving and going. And so you saw that Zuckerberg poached Daniel Gross, who was the working as the co-founder of Safe Superintelligence, from Ilya Sutskever's team. And so here's me speculating. If they were doing something cracked over there that was going to just blow things out, if I'm Daniel Gross, I'd be like, hey, Zuck, I'm already loaded because I've had exits. I make a lot of money. But Ilya, he really saw something at OpenAI, is building it here. So I'm going to stay posted. Instead, he left to go join Meta. So it makes me wonder, like, and I could be wrong, maybe they have something really awesome there yet. Or maybe it turned out there's something that's not working out there yet. And so the guy said, I think Zuckerberg with Alexander Wang and all the great researchers they're getting have a better shot at it.
Interesting. So, and why would Ilya stay? Is there more of a benefit? Like,
well,
let's
it's his baby and his reputation. He was the one who did most of the raising and everything. And so if he says, I'm done with this, then the idea is, oh, wait a minute, the Godfather who I respect Ilya Sutskever. I think he's great. I loved all of his podcasts. What he did for AI, he's just a really good person. And he was a true believer who got laughed at when he said, no, I think these LLMs could work and it's going to be the future. And people are like, ha, you're an idiot. And he left a really stable employment, a lucrative job at Google. Before then, he was with this researcher that I always screw up the name all the time and Joe laughs at me for. I think he was he with Hinton? I think he was with Hinton.
Say Alex.
I want to say
Jeffrey Hinton.
Exactly. And so he has an amazing track record. And then for him to say, I have a better way of doing, or I have a view that I could do things better at Safe Superintelligence than OpenAI could do or lead things forward. And then turns out he says, nah, fam, actually it didn't work out. I'm going to Meta. That kind of hurts the ego a bit or the credibility. I'm not saying it's the ego. He's a very nice person, but it's people say, well, wait a minute, did he lose his touch? Does he not have the same magic? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, I have such an interesting thought about like what it must be like there, because every other company has these thoughts about their customers, right? Like they have to be like, oh, is it too woke or not woke enough? Am I going to get in trouble for like this or that? Or like, will it make code that we can sell? But it seems like maybe he might be the one person who's just looking at this sort of raw model, and they're RLing it in a way that's like, just don't destroy humanity. But like, I'm not super concerned about anything else. And what it must be like to talk to that. I wonder if that's the kind of system that says like, no, I don't want to answer your questions right now. Or if it has some sort of insight that the other models just don't because it's on a different trajectory. But you know, I'll never know. I guess I won't know until they get AGI and then they win or
and then
not.
also, you got to think the VCs who invested with him, it's like, you know, we're writing you big checks and everything and go ahead and do what you want. We're giving you the fact of your track record that here we're just writing it for you. But there's an idea in the back of his mind of, okay, what you're doing is going to have some economic value in the end, or someone's going to be able to have to milk money out of it. So if it's just going to be like that computer in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and you sit there and be like 42, then it's like, was it worth it? Yeah.
Yeah. One other thing is we just talked to one of the guys at News Research. So they're doing their decentralized, distributed, open source model training. Very interesting. He's one of the guys that do model behavior. So goes really deep into that whole thing. And one of the things that he got riled up at some point on the podcast was amazing to hear, because it was really, it was phenomenal to see, because it's somebody that's very like passionate about this stuff. He's saying that with a lot of these models, AI safety, in the AI safety community, people have seen this idea of the Shoggoth or whatever. It's like this smiley face, friendly thing over here, but then there's this gargantuan monster that we can't understand. And he's saying like all this stuff that we're doing right now, by getting these models to say the right thing and not say the bad stuff, and how we do that's actually really bad for AI safety. We're focusing on the exact wrong stuff because we're trying to get them to act in a pleasant manner, and we're completely missing how to actually do AI safety research. And, you know, for example, we've seen across the board from every single model issues with this, you know, where it says the wrong stuff. Most recently, you know, with Grok, you know, I mean, it was just, it's almost hilarious because it starts calling itself Mecha Hitler, right? Because, and which for people that don't know, that's from an old Wolfenstein 3D game. So somebody managed, somebody managed to do some sort of a prompt injection or whatever. It started saying that. And then what's hilarious is it reads, you know, Twitter/X to understand the world. It sees itself saying it. So it's like this loop. So I think that's one of the reasons that they took him offline. And what's interesting to me is no matter because OpenAI had similar stuff. Google had similar stuff with the images when it started generating weird images.
Mhm.
It's all the same stuff, right? And then you always have this narrative from one side, and like, oh, Google, the reason their model is because of their ideology.
Oh,
If Elon Musk
Yeah.
comes out and it's like it's because of his ideology, it's like no, they're sitting there horrified that the models are doing this. They can't. You know what I mean? It's like they're trying to do it, but that's not what AI safety is, nor is it easy to wrangle them into not saying the wrong thing, right?
mm.
Here's the thing. Me and Joe are kind of like, we've worked with these people directly, so we're very biased on them because I acquired companies to bring some into Google, and all they did was just make it hellish for the AI researchers who are doing the real work and getting these models out. They push fear 24/7. Their next circle jerk thought loop is, okay, well, it is saying this, but it could be leading us on. And then you have Anthropic come out and say, oh, we now see the neural activations of what weights are being activated when it gives you that answer. So now we can know if it's sincere or not. But they're going to say, how can we know those neural activations are actually not lying to us? And it becomes like this infinite loop of like, how about you go to your padded room, you go work on what you want to do, and the rest of us are going to use the models and actually improve our lives. You're going to have bioscience companies using this to actually bring out cures and things like that. So I get to the point of like, it's going to be their responsibility to have it's going to be them responsibility to have the benefit of proof of showing like, here's substantiated why this is going to destroy X, Y, and Z. Not, I have a feeling X years from now this would get really, really bad. Because for me, I take it quite personally. Back in 2001, I lost my mother from ovarian cancer. She had chemotherapy for 14 years. And then my dad in 2016 got stage 4 lung cancer. And the doctor was like, get your affairs in order. Because I'm connected to Joe, and Joe's read everything possible. He's like, you should look into immunotherapy, and he probably is a candidate for that. And so I spoke to the oncologist, and she did bring that up, and we got him immunotherapy, and now he's been in remission for 10 years, like knock on wood. I'm very focused on, wow, there are people right now who are passing away that if they just had just a bit more time, they would be able to get the cure. And the difference between my mom and my dad living is about 15 years because of that. As more of these cures are coming up, it's just, God, if we can just get people to live a little bit longer, they might be able to extend their life, or we might be able to cure disease. So I tend to say I'm going to be focusing more on that technology getting out there to help folks, and less of this circle jerk of, well, yeah, the model is listening to us. Yes, it can't hurt anyone. Yes, we can deactivate it, but what is it really thinking? Even
So
though
in the meantime, as we move towards that, do you sort of like, or are you in favor of the idea of Grok like checking in with Elon's past tweets before it gives like an opinion on something controversial? Or in some sense, we know that Elon Musk is a human who probably does want the best for humanity. He's not a machine. He's not goal oriented outside of the realm of human thought. So like, do you like it, or is it just kind of like now we just have one human brain scaling into all of our?
I think the funniest part is you made some really good points. I think for the last 3 years, we had every country in the world releasing models. And then Elon says, I'm going to go for the most truth-seeking model. And it's the only model that's repeatedly brings up Hitler-like comments, Mecha Hitler, this, that, and this. So I'm thinking to myself, like, is this more a problem with Elon that he's bringing in here? We don't have a problem. And the idea of truth-seeking, he tells to people like, this is a truth-seeking model to make people think, oh, maybe somewhere in the activations, it has truth and it can suss out bad things and whatnot. And all he's doing is he's just effing around with a system prompt like everyone else.
Mhm.
Like there's no different architecture here. So if he built an architecture that was truth-seeking, it was different, then I'd be like, but right now it just seems like system prompt games. And I think you also have to ask yourself, I used to have an afro, I'm joking, but I like to get ChatGPT launched and approved for HR inside of Salesforce and Slack. I had to literally meet multiple policy teams and like do their work and write their policies and explain to them multiple times this is not going to destroy society and everything. And that was with a aligned OpenAI model that is just so Melvin Milquetoast boring. I can't even tell inappropriate jokes back in the day, and it would shame me like Claude. Not only should you not give that to me, you're a bad person for doing it. Blah 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 blah. Could you imagine going to those companies and saying, "Hey, do you want to integrate Grok 4 into your enterprise stack right now?" And it's aligned with Elon. No one's going to take that risk whatsoever. So, anyways, Joe, I want to hear what you have to say. I'm just some random M&A dude, but
I think your point about the system prompt is on target. Right now, we're sort of grappling with like the policy level, how we prompt the model. Because really the system prompt is just a part of the text you feed into the model that it gives a little bit special status to before it sees the part that the user entered in a chatbot, right? And you're really just sort of helping the model to decide how it's going to go about answering the prompt. You're not, as to Jordan's point, you're not really fundamentally designing a different kind of model. And that's all we're sort of discussing right now, right? How is the system prompt framed? Maybe a little bit of scaffolding, like you mentioned, Dylan, that it was going to go out and look at tweets. So it probably has some tool access internally. Maybe they scaffolded that manually where they said during a completion, you'll go out and retrieve some information, and here's the kind of information you can retrieve. Or maybe that's under the control of the model where it decides what it's going to retrieve, and then it continues processing, based on that retrieval. So I think we're still in the early days of those kind of agentic models that decide how to use the tools on their own. And then lastly, I think Jordan's right that enterprises are really afraid of any model that's going to get them in trouble. And almost any of these models can be driven to get into a trouble space. And right now, the way everyone's trying to protect against it is by sort of putting guardrails on the model, controlling what the system prompt has in it, pre-checking the user's prompt before even giving it to the model, and looking at the completion while it's being generated and checking to see if it says anything bad. And those are all sort of mechanical, traditional software steps to try and make sure that the product's not doing anything that's going to get you into a PR problem.
Yeah. And I mean, so this really fast, when the issue of the Google images were happening again, so people had like the narrative of it was like some ideological thing. I really don't think it was. I mean, and Demis came out and talked about it. He's like, hey, when we have these image models, they tend to go for the most common answer, the most probable answer. So what Google didn't want is when somebody typed in, show me an image of a doctor, they didn't want a white male to appear for all those queries across the entire world. So they said, hey, try to mix it up a little bit. You know what I mean? I think that was the intention.
I think I am biased on this too because I know someone who worked to help them train models, has worked with Google. And first thing is, when Google's saying, hey, we want to make it more diverse, we had image generation models that went all around the world. And I don't know how to mention this one, Black, Mexican, Native American, some you're a minority. I wasn't thinking, oh shit, this thing's generating a white doctor with doing something funny. I was thinking, oh shit, a doctor's being generated and I had to go to Fiverr and pay for it. Like no one really had this problem. It was Google came in and said, no, we know what's good for the user. The Chinese really care that we have to make sure there's a Chinese doctor on there. It's like, no, this thing's generating images for us. I don't care.
Happy it works.
Yeah, happy it works. Eureka.
Yeah, then it starts becoming more like persuasion, actually.
What they could have done is said, you know what, here's our base model, but we all know that there's different indigenous cultures and things like that might want images in certain areas. So here's a tool set for you to fine tune it, for it to start producing people that look like you or things like that. But also, here's another thing. I remember I was trying to make a picture of myself to troll myself, and I said bald-headed brown guy, and this is a DALL-E 2 or DALL-E 3, and I put a brown person there. So, are we saying people are so incompetent they're not able to say, what's the color of the person's skin? It was just Google putting politics in the situation. And I know I have an American flag here. It's because I love America and I support veterans, but this is not Fox News. I'm not a Fox News person. But internally at Google, we've multiple times had this idea of tech paternalism, where we know what's good for our users, and we used to not be that way. Something happened around 2015, 2016, where we started saying, okay, now we gotta craft the narrative, and it was really bad. Go ahead.
Well, like why is that tendency keep happening? Because we like Igor Babushkin, who is one of the engineers on the Grok 4 model, had tweets saying like, we believe in the system prompt being super open, like we think that that's the best way for this thing to be, and then we find that Grok 4 Heavy is very much hiding its system prompt. So it's like, why, like if it's in your best interest, why do you keep not doing it at the end? Like it does seem like it's better for transparency.
Yeah, I think a lot of the model providers are trying to hide parts of the model now because I think they believe it's a competitive advantage. But of course, that doesn't play well with the people who would rather sort of know what's in the model or what went into its training, which gives a big advantage to people who are willing to be open source, open weights.
Yeah. Well, it also seems like it's kind of screwing up this whole concept of open source. Like I grew up just thinking like open source means Linux. It means like something anybody can build on. And now it's kind of like, wait, that means you let me download your model, but it secretly still has a system prompt that does something or encourages me in a certain way. And I'm like, I'm not sure that's open source anymore.
Well, you saw a lot of companies split up their product between the part that was open source because they wanted to have the goodness of being an open source provider, and then the parts of their product that were proprietary and secret. And so you could sort of open source part of your product, but still maintain your proprietary advantage. And all different companies have chosen different intermediate positions.
That just seems like a freemium model to me.
Joe, well said. And I think what screws open source for LLMs is the two big components of one, GPs are so goddamn expensive, who's going to pay for that cost? And then second, data. We're seeing there's like millions of lawsuits about copyright going on right now with OpenAI and things like that.
But yeah, that's a good point.
Whereas open source, it was just grab myself a Joe Ternasky. Hey, Joe, go create Linux or something before it existed. And oh, I was the only one creating all this, and I give you all rights to use it, and I'm not using anyone's other data besides maybe I read textbooks and learning how different coding structures and algorithms. But other than that, I am Joe Ternasky. Everyone can use it. We're in this weird world. We never had a situation where the software is so much more expensive, and it costs just billions of dollars to train, and then also you're training on other people's data. I mean, there's common crawl and things like that, but then you have news or agencies who are playing games where they say, yeah, go ahead and crawl my information for Google search, but then if you crawl the same information to train on, and I'm going to try to sue you. So it's just it's a weird world, but actually I prefer this world because it makes me reflect on my tech career for the last decade between like 2011 and 2020. I don't think there was really real tech being created. All we had was maybe like crypto businesses, which were kind of like meh. I mean, Bitcoin, brilliant technology, the blockchain, whatnot, but a lot of the companies were meh. And we had a lot of social media companies and SaaS businesses. But it was only until ChatGPT came out where I really felt, oh, this is like technology and things are moving now. And we have monopolies that were so strong now feeling weak. And we have our society changing because of technology. Like this is like what tech feels alive finally. So anyways, I'll get off my soapbox.
Definitely much more fun and exciting.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, I'm so happy that this is happening. Yeah. I guess, so my just big point about this whole thing is that, there's these models that we're building and there's like this little layer that's the system prompt, and everybody, and everybody's like trying to shift it just to appease their audience or whatever sort of political leaning that they have. And they're just like, be a little bit more like this, don't dismiss this. And it always not always, but a lot of times backfires spectacularly. And I think because most people, the media normies, as you say, like as people don't really understand it, they're so hyper focused on this, they're so over indexed on this thing, that it's like, I think one, system prompts should always be open so we can see what is in there, right? If somebody's trying to push it one way or another, we should be able to see it. And number two, just because somebody's system prompt backfires, I don't know if that's as, like, I think most people think that means that the model has been trained to say all those things. And it's like, well, not really. It's just this little layer that we're trying to guide it, and it's just not working well.
But you know how much people love conspiracy theories, right?
Yeah.
And if you give them some evidence that their previous conspiracy theory was true, like you go in there and you hack the system prompt and you refuse to reveal it, and then it comes out and the system prompt contains something that feeds into their paranoia, then it's natural for them to assume that probably you also futzed around with the training set.
Right.
And tried to exclude certain concepts or make certain, things emphasized because that's part of your belief system, right? Like you saw what happened with Google. Jordan mentioned the search wars, but in the early days, you could do search. I forget what the term was for it, but it's essentially type ahead in the omnibar, right? So you're in the omnibar of the browser and you're typing a search query, and it would suggest additional keywords to extend your query. And certain things became popular because people would game that thing. They would get millions of people to type a certain series of keywords, and then that would go into the training set. And then when you typed the first word, it would extend it with the other words that were politically incorrect.
Right.
And everyone would lose their mind.
Right.
And then Google would go into the training set and truncate that out and put in something safer. And then people would have that as like evidence that Google was putting their fingers on the scale, which they were.
Joe, maybe you could maybe you know more about this than me, but like it seems to me like when you're feeding in things that Gandhi said or things that Hitler said, you have to tell the system like on the way in, like, by the way, we sort of like this person and we pretty much hate this person. Like, tell me, like weight it different. Or are you saying, or do you know, like, does it go in completely equally and then it's only in reinforcement learning when it's talking back to us that it starts to realize that Gandhi and Hitler were not equal in society?
Everything up until that last thing, yes. In pre-training, it's all just text. And remember that it's such a large quantity of text and such a random kind of text that they put huge amounts of energy into just eliminating duplicates from the text, or looking for parts, chunks of the text that are just clearly bad, strings of random characters that aren't even any human language. They try to find them and eliminate them. So they're just trying to get basic quality in the pre-training data set. And that data set is so large, there's no way you're going to go through it by hand. Everything you're going to do is...
Doesn't that feel very different from a human, though? It's not like we learn that stuff equally and then learn later one person's good or bad.
Does.
Like it goes in with a certain context.
You're absolutely right. It's completely artificial, and the size of it is way more than a human being could ever read in their entire life. So it's completely artificial, right? And remember, the language model is going to be handed that giant training set through multiple rounds, epochs of training. And there's just no way that a human being would read anything close to that in their entire life. So it is very different than what a person does, or how a person learns from text. And we're not even talking yet about audio or video or any other data sources, which are going to be another 100 or 1,000 or whatever times larger, right? Because that video data is much larger. So to answer your question, it has nothing to do with human beings. It's totally different. It is so large and so low quality that it's still a huge open problem to make it higher quality, to filter it down. Even though they do a lot already, it's still a mess. And there's a lot of papers published every year about ways to improve the quality of that pre-training data. And then you made the point about RL. There you have much more curation because the data set can be much smaller. And that raises a whole other host of questions. Like there was a paper just recently saying that maybe all you need is one question in your RL data set to do reinforcement learning training, which is just mind-boggling. And if it's true, it sort of lends weight to this current theory, unproven, that the model's not actually learning new things during RL. It's just filtering down or selecting from what it learned in pre-training.
What's the one question? Or
what they did was they took a small training set. It was like 1,400 questions. And that training set is very successful if you use it for RL training. It's mostly math questions, but you get some spillover where training on those math questions improves coding and chemistry and physics and so on, right? So that's interesting. And they said, if you look at those questions and you feed them to the model that's been pre-trained but has not yet received RL training, how well can it do on them? Because some of the questions it can already answer. And some of them it can answer some of the time. Like it gets sort of, 50% of the time it gets it right. And some of them are just way too hard, right? And the ones that are best for RL training are the ones that are in that intermediate zone, gets it right some of the time. So they're already trying to do that kind of curation. And what they were realizing was that they picked one of those questions that was in the middle, where it got it right some of the time, and then just did an RL epoch on that one question being repeated over and over again, the model got very good.
Wow.
And it ended up that if you tuned it a little bit, it would get as good as it got training on the entire set of RL questions to start with. So from 1,400, you went down to 1 or 2 questions. And you also still got transfer. It also improved at chemistry and physics just like before, which is goofy if you think about it.
Yeah.
It strongly implies that the model already knew all that stuff.
Right.
And that this RL training is just helping it select from what it knows or narrow down what it uses out of what it knows, which goes back to Dylan's question of what is with this ridiculous pre-training data set that is so low quality?
Well, and one thing not a ton of people think about, but when a baby is born, it has more neurons, and a lot of what's happening in those early formative years where you're picking up on language in a way you can't as an adult is actually pruning. Like you're actually losing a bunch of useless parts of the brain, and it's getting technically smaller, but more efficient at that time too. So with RL, maybe we're doing kind of something like that. We're saying like, hey, start ignoring, keep these. But Jordan, I think we can lean on your M&A history for this next question. Should Apple buy Minstrel? Should they buy Perplexity? Should they buy DeepSeek?
Anyways, guys, I'll see you later on this one.
No. What? Apple is behind. They have more cash than
no,
God.
I just...
What's the move?
We're talking about fear of missing out, and I wanted to write a newsletter, the 6 Substack, and I was going to have an idea. It's called, like, Savior Economics, where people think, oh, if I just buy something, it'll fix all my problems. We do it in our own lives of like, if I buy this training class, I'm going to get like a 6-pack abs, or I buy this car, this girl's going to want to date me and blah, blah. You have a lot of companies, large companies that have just bureaucratic issues, culture issues, and there's certain areas that are never going to be good at competing, but they think if I buy something, it's going to magically allow us to get in that area, and then our culture issues just go away. So there's this meme right now of like, oh yeah, they should go buy Le Chat and Mistral so Apple can formally surrender with the French in the AI area. Or that's just a joke. People are going to attack me. Mistral's great team. Or they should buy Anthropic. Or they should buy Perplexity. It's just people are just constantly like throwing spaghetti off the walls here. And I think that just Apple his culture is... Joe worked at Apple, so it's like it's hilarious. Like I'm talking to Michael Jordan about basketball. You see Michael Jordan, you dribble the ball. Blah, blah. Apple has a hardware culture. That's what they have, true and true. And if you look at the cloud computing revolution, if you look at social media, if you look at what happened in SaaS, you look at what happened in AI, Apple really never like went all in on software. They had the platform on top of their iPhone and had other people build on top of it. But they were never known for like, we've built the killer product on top of the iPhone. Like you get an iPhone, what's the first thing you do? You go download Google Chrome. Safari, please. You know I don't speak Spanish. Like no one's gonna use that. So, I think they could acquire more money in God, but just their internal culture and how they're structured right now. I think the founder is going to be given like, oh yeah, come join us and you'll be able to like work on AI. But then once they get inside, the founder is going to say, I just can't work with this culture and get things done. They're too focused on hardware deliveries and making sure the phone is the most important part of the layer, when I think the future is going to be how AI properly integrates on these phones, but you're not allowing me to call the shots. I'm like more along for the ride. But anyways, Joe, I want to hear your thoughts on this too.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I mean, I'm trying to imagine a really good researcher who wants to build an incredible reasoning model. And in their minds, if I put myself in their position, the core is the reasoning model itself and its access to the user's data, because Apple has access to all the private data of their users. And a good reasoning model could make use of that data and return really customized, personalized responses. And Apple has this user base that's incredible, and they have access to people through all of the different devices they've already sold to them, right? And that's how a high-power researcher would frame the problem and what they would try to build. But it's not what Apple wants for their business. What they want is a good reason for their customers to either buy a new device or upgrade their existing devices. And that's it. The reasoning model to them is just a feature. And if they have a hardware schedule where they're getting, to Jordan's point, where they're getting ready to ship a new device for Christmas, that damn reasoning model better be ready for the Christmas season when that device comes out, or it's going to cost them, crazy amounts of lost sales and obsolete devices.
And two other ways they screwed themselves. One is, we're the privacy company. Privacy is the most important thing. Privacy, privacy, privacy. I haven't even given my spouse my name. That's why I care about privacy so much. And then with these LLMs, it's like, the more information you give us, the better responses we give you. And it's like, ooh, ouch. And then the second thing is, we're the perfection company. Anytime you see something, it's perfect. Everything's perfect. It's Johnny Ives got the 10 Commandments from Moses, and this was the design for what we're creating next. And LLMs are messy. They'll give you things you don't expect. But here's the thing. They're doing something for you, which is awesome, which puts you into the mode of you're going to be reviewing stuff. And this was the same issue that Google dealt with when they were hemming and hawing on releasing Bard or Lambda or whatnot, of like, oh, it might say something that's not perfect. Like, what do we do? I don't know. We do a disclaimer and we trust our users that they have at least 10 neurons and they can understand what to fix. And ChatGPT can't do that. No. The AI alignment people told us not to do it. So I think they have just a lot of cultural issues here. But also, but Joe mentioned too, of like, everything's relative in life. What has Android and the Pixel phone done with the LLMs that make people say, F my iPhone, I'm going Android? Jack shit. And this pisses me off because I'm an Android user. And they haven't been able to deliver this. If you look at,
coming very, very soon, right?
Dude, you guys always, okay. You guys are great. I was gonna say I love you.
I'm optimistic. I'm always optimistic.
No. But you see, we're old.
Wes is already thinking about the thumbnail.
I've been to 20 different IOs. All we do is promise you in April and May that your life's going to change, and then we never ship. And so if you notice, there's the IO afterglow. You'll see Gemini usage increase after IO, and everyone's all pumped. And then the people forget about what they promised, and they don't usually deliver on it. Gemini is still shoehorned on top of Google Stack. And Gemini just doesn't work well in Google Docs, doesn't work well in Sheets, doesn't work in Gmail. It's a really crappy experience overall. Whereas ChatGPT, LLM is the product, and they build everything else to it, so you have a better experience overall what you're doing. And so I haven't seen anything yet, and it could happen where it's like, oh, my Android, like, instead of me going directly, like, for instance, this is I call it the Great App Remix. I'm sorry for boring you all, but why is it when someone messages me on Partyful, there's a party, and they want me to make ice cream, and they want to know if I'm going to travel to San Francisco, I have to first RSVP on Partyful, then I have to go to DoorDash and order my ice cream, and then I have to go to Uber, and I have to go reserve an Uber to come pick me up. Why can't I just be like, hey, Google, I want to go to the party. I just woke up my Google. I want to go to the party. I also, right, exactly. I want to go to the party. I want DoorDash to deliver me ice cream ingredients, and I also want Uber to get me a ride. And then why can't the Android go to all the apps and connect and just do that for me? If it could do something just like that, that would be a wake-up call for iPhone to be like, oh, we're really behind. We got to get something out. So anyway, sermon overall stuff.
Your mention of the Google Home product is also interesting. And going back to Dylan's question, in the previous round of so-called smart assistants, Google bought the Siri team. Right?
Really?
That was an acquisition. Siri is like an acronym. It's something about Stanford Research because it's a SRI project, right? The company SRI. But my point is, they bought that product following Jordan's model of like, this is the savior. We'll buy this thing and we'll integrate it because we're worried about what Amazon's doing with Alexa. And Amazon is painting a picture where the future of the user experience is that you just speak to this thing and it takes action. And now it turns out that none of those products were anywhere close to doing what we actually wanted, sort of to Jordan's scenario. And now people are already reframing it, like Johnny Ive is going to build this IO product that is going to be some kind of a puck, and you're going to talk to it, and it's going to take actions on your behalf. It's like, where have I heard that story before? There's a puck that I put on my desk that I talk to.
Right. Yeah. And it's, man, I feel like we're so close to having, well, no, I shouldn't say so close. I feel like we have all the pieces of these like universal assistants. Like the other day I was messing around with 04 Mini High. So kind of because it's excellent at visual reasoning. And it really is like surprisingly good. I uploaded this massive, whatever, it doesn't matter. But the point is, like, I was just taking pictures of my food and saying log, the macros, the calories. It's incredibly good at that. Really, really accurate. So why would I use one of those macro apps or whatever? What is it, FitnessPal or whatever, and type in, you know what I mean?
You've been hanging out with Dr. Mike Israetel, haven't you?
Yeah, or I've used ChatGPT to calorie count and lost like 20 pounds over 2.5 months. So it's God tier. And it's the death also to certain apps because it's not only helping me with the Calorie Pal would do, it helps me with my Water Pro does, reminds me to drink water.
Right.
It also helps me create recipe plan. So it just one-shot all those apps out of existence to a degree.
Yeah. It's like we have all these pieces that can be put together into everything you just said with DoorDash, with Calorie Counter, everything. And if Google builds it, it'll replace their ad ecosystem. So is that the ultimate goal?
Well, you can charge $300 a month for something that does everything, if you can knock out all of those competitors.
That is definitely the goal of the foundation lab companies.
Mm-hmm. And also it shows the importance of your business model aligning with technology. Google's whole entire model was we give you everything for free, and then we just throw ads down your grandmother's throat until she dies, and so long as she hires a funeral home from us on a Google ad and they click it, we're good. I screwed that joke up, whatever. Don't forget to like and subscribe. So then when ChatGPT came out and said, hey, we'll charge you $20 a month, just like if new features come out, you get them first. And then they kind of tinkered their way into, it's like, okay, this is how this is going to work. You get priority access, this and that. And people were just coughing up their money. Like now they have almost 17 million paid users there. They were like, oh, we're not as constrained in the ad model as Google is. So it allows us to experiment with this new future. And so this is the thing these public companies deal with is, yes, Google just said we're doing AI overviews and everything, but internally for years our sales team was like, and you're going to cannibalize a lot of our ad revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Are you okay with that and what's going to happen? And that's
the fight inside the company has got to be extreme.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so what for Joe and I show is like we criticize these companies, but also we understand that you're only as good as the system you're in. And so Sundar probably sees, oh yeah, we need to do this and that and this, but then he has all these other constraints around him that make it not that possible. Like, oh, really? No, duh, Jordan, we should build the great app remix. Oh, yeah. Like that's what I'm trying to get to, but here are my constraints. We only have 4 more minutes. Should we jump into the Zuckerberg and the founder imperative and how he's able to?
Let's do it.
Okay, so can you name any CEO who's a non-founder who basically said, hey, to the board, hey, the last project initiative that I spent a lot of money on sucked ass, and what I want to do is double down, and I want $100 to $200 billion more so we can go along this way.
But it's going to work this time.
But it's going to work this time. Believe me, no.
What about the WeWork guy?
Oh, that was different because he was getting everyone blunted. He's giving everyone blunts, and they're like, okay, sure, whatever, Remember that community?
And he eventually ran out of money.
He ran out of money.
Have the revenue stream
and
that
he had
Zuckerberg
community-adjusted EBITDA, which is hilarious. But then he found, hey, he's back in business with Flow. Somehow he got A16Z to give him a check.
Once you've bought into EBITDA as a concept, putting community adjusted in front of it is just additional financial innovation.
See, he should got $1 billion just for that. So Zuckerberg is the only person that could do that. He has a founder imperative. He is the owner, operator, original founder of the company, has enough shares in the company, and has a track record that he can get away with that. He has that long-term type of thinking. It could go tits up. We don't know, but you're not seeing any mercenary CEOs making calls like that. And there's actually research to back this up. There's a research house called, I think it's Horizons Research Group. We'll have a link in the description, where they looked at S&P 500 returns for the last 20 years, and they looked at CEOs that were founder-led since IPO, and then ones that were hired by mercenaries. And the founder-led ones crushed the ones that were run by mercenaries because, one, you don't have to worry about shareholder proxy battles and board garbage. 2, you have long-term thinking. 3, you have this CEO aura of, I was here from day one. This is kind of my baby. It's something special. Would you like to come join me on this adventure? You have moral authority. And so that allows you to get ambitious plans of like, we're going to go spend $200 billion more, and we're going to hire all these AI researchers for hundreds of millions of dollars. You want to come join? People are like, okay, we'll let you do it. Any other person in the organization you propose that, they'd be like, oh, so here's HR, you're going to be fired.
Yeah.
because you're crazy. So, Joe,
Or you're going to be asked to write up a plan about what you think we should do that they can basically ignore.
so true. Do you think Zuckerberg wrote like a business plan and all that? Besides, maybe he wrote in his hand, yeah. So I'm going to need 200 billion more. We're also going to make a data center as big as Manhattan. And oh, sorry, this is my DoorDash order. So, anyways, we're going to do it, right? Great, good, okay.
I think George Hotz has done a really nice job of articulating this idea.
Alive companies, dead companies. Maybe Joe, you can go into that.
Yeah, but it's basically the same idea as what you said about the founders. And he characterizes the companies as if they still have a founder leading the company, a person. And I think for him, it's not only a founder, but a person who understands the technology. Then he considers the company to be living or an alive company. And if not, the company is dead. And the way I think of his analogy is it's basically like a tree, right? The tree can die, it's still standing, and it might be there for another decade or two. But internally, it's no longer growing or strong, and it's just waiting for the first thing to sort of push it over. And I think a lot of companies, even fairly substantial, successful companies, are in that position, right? They're not run by anybody that understands the technology that got the company to where it is. And when something changes in the environment, they're really vulnerable.
Yeah, it does seem like the most drastic thing that I could imagine is someone like Tim Cook has to say to Andrew Karpathy, look, you're the new CEO of Apple. I will get you $1 trillion over the next 4 or 5 years, like pave an entire new course, and we'll just cannibalize everything in hardware we've ever done.
Yeah,
and
no chance.
Just imagine like how disruptive that is at the short term.
Here's another proxy of when a company is like a dead tree is when dividend guys on Twitter are saying like, oh, the yield's so good on certain companies. Look at the yield. It's like you're now getting a different class of investors who are like, I'm just here to milk the existing business model. I'm not here to actually build the future, which is risky.
And to Dylan's example, I mean, Apple has been goosing its share price by massive buybacks for probably a decade now. So they don't really have growth to justify their ratios as a technology company. But what they do have is tremendous buybacks, such that every remaining share outstanding has now got a larger chunk of the profits.
Yeah.
That's financial engineering.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, to follow on the Facebook story, here's some late breaking news. Last week, a small group of top members of the lab, including Alexander Wang, reporting to Facebook, 28, Meta's new chief AI officer, discussed abandoning the company's most powerful open source AI model called Behemoth in favor of developing a closed model. Two people with knowledge of the matter said, for years, Meta has chosen to open source its AI models, which means it makes the computer code public for other developers to build on. Closed models keep their underlying code private. Meta executives have long argued it's better for the technology to be built in public so that AI development will move faster and be accessible for more developers. This is another part of the founder's imperative. You had Zuckerberg bring in Alexander Wang, who was a founder, to come into the company and say, can you put some energy in here and make tough decisions that maybe I might be against initially? Like what CEOs will do and founders will do will say, like, they might go through a certain process in the early development of the company and gotten really nastily burnt by a certain idea. And they say, never again will we ever do this? And I've been at Google and Slack and I've heard this before. And so when you're new, you're like, I'm not going to bring this up. I'm not going to risk my promotion on this, even though this idea is like perfect for what they're doing and it's going to give us more money. But Alexander can come in because he has been anointed by Zuck and he has more money than God now and say, you know what? Maybe it's time that we reevaluate this whole open source thing. And that's part of that founder energy. But anyways, we're taking up too much of your times, guys.
No,
this 132.
Excellent interview. One quick last question, maybe a sentence. Any chance Tesla and XI merge?
Okay, I have another. Sorry, I'm monopolizing this conversation. Okay, here's my thought. Okay, I put a tweet on this earlier today. Elon does XAI and then buys out Twitter for a ridiculous valuation, $44 billion, when Twitter's user growth is stagnant and revenue has been down. That's not the valuation it should be. Second step, now he's trying to get it valued at $170 to $200 billion because he's getting the a sovereign wealth fund from the Middle East to come take a look. Third step, I'm hearing analysts on Wall Street saying Elon's spending too much time on XAI. He needs to spend more time on Tesla, and what we need to do is buy XAI. which will then lead to Elon doing one of the greatest moves in business history. He took his bags from what he overpaid in Twitter and is now getting Wall Street to say, I'm going to give you money plus more, and we're going to like it. And if Elon does that, I criticize him for everything else. He is one of the greatest business minds in human history to take that spectacular turd and turn it into a bailout.
But it goes the other way, right? Like XAI buys Tesla. He takes
No.
price and then buys it all up.
XAI buying Tesla? No, he doesn't have enough money for that to happen.
Tesla, he's got the publicly
Tesla's $1 trillion, right? Oh, yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking he can use all that publicly traded money to pour into an XI, so use somebody else's money.
Originally, what he wants to do is he wanted to get DeepMind to be bought by Tesla back in 2014.
Right.
And Mustafa and Demis were just like, I like you, but you're kind of out there. That's what, not out there as the whole political stuff, more of it's kind of craziness, because that's what Elon runs his companies, keeps it alive. And so I think having XAI in there would then allow him more easily be like, okay, we're going to integrate this LLM with Optimus. We're going to do some things with the car. But then me, and I'm not the science person here, I would say, well, why are we spending $200 billion in XAI when we could probably get open source models off the shelf? And what type of, do we really need a reasoning model in a Tesla? I mean, mostly people are using GPT-4o type models, but I think that's what's going to happen, because then Wall Street's going to say, well, at least, it cost us $200 billion, but at least now we have Elon's focus just on one organization besides SpaceX and whatnot. But Joe, love to hear what you think too. I
want to hear what Dylan was going to say.
Yeah.
Oh, well, to me, it's a $1 trillion company, so it's just tough to do. But in my thinking, if Elon wants massive control and nobody to be judging him or holding him to any accountability, the best thing to do is be like, oh, yeah, Cybertruck sucks, Robotaxi, like software bugs, like, get it down to 400, 500 billion, bring in some Saudi Arabia money, like...
Yeah. What he's going to do also, though, part of the deal is they're going to see if they can give more voting shares to this transaction. So it's basically kind of the same thing for all intents and purposes. It'll still be Tesla. But it'll be Elon will have more voting shares, so then he won't be feel so fearful or whatnot. But
yeah, that's the Meta Google solution, right?
Yep.
Different share classes with different voting rights.
Right.
And obviously, this has been a dream of his for a while, is that Tesla would be more like a private company where he could just sort of do what he wants.
Yeah. Well, especially if you want Grok to help you with political campaigns, like it can be out there marketing and all these things that just seem like they'd be so tied into a public company and would hurt the value. But,
yeah. It's also interesting that SpaceX is doing so well.
God, it's crushing.
And it's a private company still. And it's also an Elon company. It's really bizarre. It's like SpaceX is just rolling in cash and just executing, whereas Tesla is having so much difficulties.
Gwynne Shotwell, the secret hero there. She's the only person that can stand up to Elon, and he kind of, okay, Gwynne, you got it. Like, for instance, do you remember when Elon made the right call and said, you know what? We support democracy, Ukrainians, you get Starlink. And then Elon was probably on a ketamine high and said, I'm paying so much money for this. What's going on here?
That's right. He wanted money for it.
Gwynne Shotwell texts him, was like, will you shut the fuck up? I'm speaking to Joe Biden right now, and we're negotiating the same thing right now. And he's like, oh, sorry.
That's funny. Okay.
It was just 2 days ago, right? SpaceX said, like a Wall Street Journal said, that SpaceX is investing $2 billion into XAI. So they're buying shares, I guess.
Elon's denying it. But Wall Street Journal sources their stories pretty well, so I'd probably go with Wall Street Journal. But that just also shows that Elon.
But why is it's like both his company? Like, why is he even buying one? I don't know.
Look, one of the most brilliant minds when it comes to technology and things like that. But I think he's just bit off more than he can chew, and so he's kind of in crazy making mode all the time. And so it's like, I'm getting $2 billion here from SpaceX, which is short term convenient. And in his mind also is I'm burning $1 billion a month on XAI, so I just need cash right now. Whereas a long term thing would be just like, when can I get this sucker into Tesla in some form? So I'm thinking he's using this money as kind of like bridge financing until he gets his final goal of getting into Tesla. But I could be wrong. I know your YouTube comment section will crucify me later on, but we'll see how it goes.
And his new
That should be
company, Macro Hard, that I think he recently announced. No, we don't have time to cover that.
What is
That's
that?
a whole-
Oh,
It's a play on Microsoft. It's because
Oh.
internally he said he created his own version of he's using Grok to then generate code that can then generate other pieces of software and apps and whatnot. And they were joking what they should call it instead of Microsoft, Micro Hard, and it has a sexual reference to it. So Elon's like, that sounds good, but well, it doesn't make sense to make that because you already have XAI. What's the point of XAI then, right? So.
Yeah. We
But
should
yeah-
talk about code generation companies at some point.
Yeah, if these two gentlemen would like to have us back, maybe we could, but I don't know.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
These
that's
have
great
been
stuff.
absolutely amazing. We should definitely schedule another one because we barely scratched the surface. Thank you so much for everybody, for you guys joining us here. Make sure you're subscribed. Go over to their channel, SVIC Podcast. We'll leave links down below. Make sure you're subscribed. They cover a lot of the stuff that's happening in the Silicon Valley, all of that, and it's an insider's perspective. So oftentimes there's stuff that we don't see, that we don't understand as the outsiders. So this is extremely helpful. Thank you so much, guys. And let's put another one on the books very, very soon.
Wes, thank you for having us here. You're making this brown man blush for what you said about both of us. And also thank you to the community. And make sure you guys like and subscribe Wes's stuff and Dylan's stuff too.
Boom.
Cool.
See you next time.
Bye.